My mom texted, "Don't call or come over, we are done." I replied, "Got it." By midnight, she couldn't stop calling. My name is Latrice Washington, 35 years old, an interior designer who carved out her own success in Atlanta, Georgia. It was a Thursday evening when my phone lit up with a text from Mama that made my blood run cold. "Don't call or come over. We are done." My heart dropped into my stomach, but I didn't cry or reach for the phone to call her back. I typed 2 words. "Got it." That was it. Just like that, years of sacrifice evaporated. Years of covering Mama's dialysis treatments, bailing out my younger brother Terrence's gambling debts, keeping their soul food restaurant from going under, all gone with one cold text message. I'd always been the black sheep, the daughter who chose art and design over their family legacy, the one they looked at like I wasn't quite good enough. But that text? That was a line drawn in concrete. I wasn't about to beg or grovel or explain myself anymore. By midnight, my phone became a hurricane of notifications. Missed calls lighting up my screen one after another, voicemails piling up so fast I couldn't keep track. Mama's number flashed again and again, then Terrence's, even Daddy's number started showing up. They were in full panic mode, and I knew exactly why. For the last 6 years, I'd been their golden goose, their financial safety net, and now that net had disappeared. What happened in the weeks that followed turned everything I thought I knew about my family completely upside down. Stay with me to find out how this all unraveled. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, hit that like button, drop a comment sharing your experience, and subscribe because this story gets wild. Growing up in Atlanta, our family looked like something straight out of a magazine. Daddy ran a small chain of soul food restaurants, a local legend who turned one tiny storefront into 3 thriving locations serving the best fried chicken and collard greens in the city. Mama had walked away from her accounting career to support his vision, managing the books and keeping everything running smooth behind the scenes. My brother Terrence, 3 years younger than me, was the chosen one, the golden child they pinned all their hopes on to carry the Washington family torch into the next generation. Then there was me. Latrice Washington, the odd one out, dreaming of color palettes and floor plans instead of recipes and profit margins. From the time I could hold a crayon, Daddy made his expectations crystal clear. "These restaurants are our future," he'd announce at Sunday dinner, his voice carrying that weight of authority you don't question. "You're gonna learn this business inside and out, Latrice." But I couldn't have cared less about grease-stained aprons or inventory spreadsheets. What lit me up inside was designing spaces, creating homes and offices where people felt truly alive and inspired. By sophomore year of high school, I was filling notebooks with sketches of modern lofts and cozy coffee shops, imagining sleek downtown offices and warm family homes. When I finally worked up the courage to tell Daddy I wanted to study interior design at the Savannah College of Art and Design, he actually laughed right in my face. "That's a cute hobby, baby girl, not a real career," he said, his tone sharp enough to draw blood. Mama sat there at that kitchen table, her eyes darting away from mine, already choosing which side of the fence she'd stand on. At 17 years old, I applied to SCAD anyway. When that acceptance letter arrived in the mail, I was walking on clouds, ready to celebrate. Daddy's reaction crushed those dreams like a boot on glass. "If you're not joining these restaurants, you're completely on your own," he said, arms folded across his chest like a judge delivering a sentence. "No tuition money, no support, nothing." Mama nodded right along with him, her silence screaming louder than any words could. Terrence, barely 14 at the time, smirked at me like he'd already won some competition I didn't know we were having. I felt like a stranger in my own home, watching their favoritism toward him carve a divide between us that would only grow deeper with time. I worked myself to the bone, waiting tables at the Cheesecake Factory and tutoring kids in math to cover what my scholarships didn't pay for. Late nights that stretched into early mornings, endless double shifts, and a mountain of student loan debt got me through those 4 years. Daddy never once asked how I was managing to survive, and Mama's occasional "I'm proud of you," sweetie, felt hollow as a drum when she'd turn around and gush about Terrence's half-hearted attempts at helping in the kitchen. That boy could do no wrong in their eyes, even when he'd show up late, mess up orders, or blow off his responsibilities entirely. I remember this one Christmas break when I came home from Savannah. Terrence had forgotten to lock up the Decatur location, and somebody broke in overnight, stealing equipment worth thousands of dollars. Daddy brushed it off like it was nothing. "He's still learning the ropes," he said with a shrug, while I caught hell for missing one family Sunday dinner because I had a major design presentation due the next morning. The distance between us grew wider every year. Daddy's entire world revolved around Terence, the son who'd inherit the restaurant empire, regardless of how little that boy actually cared about any of it. Mama followed Daddy's lead in everything, saving all her warmth and attention for my brother. I tried so hard to maintain a connection with her, calling every weekend, sharing photos of my design projects and sketches, but her responses came back short and distracted. Terence is doing such amazing work at the restaurant, she'd say like it was some badge of honor that deserved a parade. I wanted to scream at the top of my lungs, what about me? What about everything I'm accomplishing? But I swallowed those words down deep, holding on to this naive hope that someday they'd finally see my value. After graduating from SCAD, I poured every ounce of energy into launching my interior design career. Savannah had taught me to think bigger, to transform ordinary spaces into stories people wanted to be part of, not just four walls and furniture. Back in Atlanta, I started small-scale, redesigning neighborhood coffee shops and turning cramped bistros into inviting gathering places that people loved. My first major breakthrough came when I turned 28, and a boutique hotel group hired me to completely revamp their lobbies across Georgia and Tennessee. Clean lines mixed with warm textures and just the right touch of southern elegance, my designs started getting noticed in all the right circles. Pretty soon, high-end restaurants and luxury homes were calling my office, and my name, Latrice Washington, began appearing in Atlanta design magazines and blogs. By the time I hit 30 years old, I was signing contracts worth six figures, building a solid reputation as Atlanta's go-to designer for upscale residential and commercial spaces. But when it came to my family, that was a completely different story, and not a happy one. 5 years ago, Mama's kidneys started failing. The doctors laid it out plain and simple. Her treatment would cost tens of thousands, maybe even hundreds of thousands depending on how things progressed. Daddy's restaurants were already struggling with rising food costs and increased competition, and their insurance barely scratched the surface of what was needed. I didn't think twice. I immediately wired money for her hospital bills, covering specialist appointments, medications, and everything the insurance wouldn't touch. "We'll pay you back, Latrice," Daddy said over the phone, his voice clipped and businesslike, but I knew better than to hold my breath waiting for that money to return. Mama sent me a text message. "Thank you, baby." That was the extent of it. No phone calls, no real expressions of gratitude or appreciation. It stung like alcohol on an open wound, but I convinced myself I was doing it for her health, not for their approval or recognition. Then came Terence and his disasters. My brother, barely into his late 20s, had launched this barbecue food truck business that went belly up within 6 months. He'd racked up massive debts, maxed out every credit card he could get his hands on, and couldn't even cover his portion of the family restaurant expenses. Daddy called me one Tuesday evening, his tone all business and no warmth. "Terence needs some help getting back on his feet," he said, like it was my automatic responsibility to fix my brother's messes. I transferred the money without argument, $45,000 to clear his debts and another $25,000 to keep the restaurants operating. Terence never said thank you, not even once. Instead, at a 4th of July family barbecue, he stood there bragging to cousins and uncles about how he'd turned everything around all by himself, as if my $70,000 hadn't been the only thing keeping him from drowning. I kept giving and giving, like some kind of ATM machine they could withdraw from whenever they needed. When the Buckhead location needed new kitchen equipment, a commercial refrigerator system that cost a small fortune, I covered it without being asked. When Mama's treatment required a specialist at Emory University Hospital with consultation fees that made your eyes water, I paid for everything including her transportation and overnight stays. Each time I opened my wallet, I held on to this desperate hope that they'd finally see me, really truly see me as more than just a source of money. But at every family gathering, every Sunday dinner, the conversation always circled back to the restaurants, Terence's supposed potential, or Daddy's grand expansion plans. My award-winning work designing that luxury condo building in Midtown? Barely rated a mention. One time I brought this magazine feature about my hotel lobby designs, thinking maybe Mama might feel some pride in what I'd accomplished. She glanced at it for maybe 3 seconds and said, "That's real nice, honey, but Terence has been working himself to death at the restaurant." I forced a smile onto my face while my chest felt like somebody was standing on it. The pattern wore me down bit by bit, year after year. I'd call Mama hoping for a genuine conversation, but she'd immediately pivot to talking about Terence's latest half-baked idea or how stressed Daddy was about the business. Daddy never asked about my projects or my clients, only picking up the phone when they needed something from me. "The Decatur location's running short this month," he'd say, and like clockwork, I'd transfer the money, feeling less like a daughter and more like a bank account with legs. Terence acted entitled to everything I'd built, like my success was something the family owned collectively. "You're doing good for yourself, so why wouldn't you help out?" he said once, casual as anything, like the decade I'd spent grinding and building meant absolutely nothing. Looking back now with clear eyes, I see how naive and desperate I was, thinking money could somehow earn their respect or love. Every check I wrote, every bill I paid in full was me trying to build a bridge across the canyon they'd created between us. But they took it all, well over $300,000 across those years, and gave nothing meaningful back. Not even basic acknowledgement or a simple "we appreciate you." The hurt accumulated slowly, quietly, but it was heavy as concrete. And I started asking myself if I'd ever truly be enough for them, or if I was just fooling myself completely. 6 years into building my business, I pitched an idea to my family that I'd been dreaming about for months. My interior design company was thriving beyond my expectations, and I developed this vision for a new venture, a sustainable design firm specializing in eco-friendly materials specifically for hotels and commercial restaurants. This wasn't just some passion project I dreamed up. It was a complete business plan backed by solid market research showing huge demand for green design in Atlanta's booming hospitality industry. I needed startup capital to scale things up properly, and for the first time in forever, I genuinely believed my family might see my vision as more than just a hobby or side project. I put together this detailed presentation, complete with cost breakdowns, projected returns, competitor analysis, everything a serious investor would want to see. I invited everyone to a meeting at Mama and Daddy's house in Cascade Heights. Standing in their dining room with my laptop open and slides ready to go, I felt my stomach churning with nervous energy. Daddy sat at the head of that big oak table, arms crossed over his chest, his face unreadable as stone. Mama hovered nearby, fussing with coffee cups and avoiding direct eye contact with me. Terence slouched in his chair scrolling through his phone, barely pretending to pay attention to what I was saying. His wife Camille sat quietly beside him, giving me a small encouraging smile that felt like the only warmth in that cold room. I took a deep breath and launched into my presentation, explaining how sustainable materials could actually reduce long-term costs, while attracting environmentally conscious clients who were willing to pay premium prices. "This could put Atlanta on the national map for green hospitality design," I said, keeping my voice steady despite the nerves making my hands shake slightly. "I'm asking for a $200,000 investment that I'll pay back with interest within 3 years. Daddy didn't even let me finish my sentence. "That's a pipe dream," he interrupted, leaning forward with his elbows on the table. "You think hotel chains care about recycled materials and bamboo floors? They want cheap and fast, not expensive experiments." His words hit me like a slap across the face, but I pushed forward, showing detailed data about client demand and market trends. Terence snorted without even looking up from his phone. "Sounds like throwing money down a drain," he said dismissively. "Why don't you stick to picking out curtains and paint colors?" I clenched my fists under that table, my face burning with humiliation and anger. I'd spent 4 months developing this business plan, consulting with industry experts, and they were dismissing it without even truly looking at the numbers. Mama stayed silent, rearranging napkins and coasters, doing that thing she always did to avoid any kind of conflict. I turned toward her desperately, hoping for even a tiny shred of support. "Mama, you've seen the quality of my work over the years. You know I can make this successful." She hesitated, looking uncomfortable, then mumbled quietly, "It sounds pretty risky, baby. The restaurants are what we know and understand." Her words hurt worse than Daddy's outright dismissal ever could. I'd paid for her life-saving medical treatments, kept their struggling business from bankruptcy, and I was still the outsider looking in through the window. Camille spoke up, her voice soft but clear in that tense room. "I actually think it's really innovative," she said, glancing nervously at Terence. "Sustainability is huge right now in commercial design." For about 5 seconds, I felt a tiny spark of hope flickering, but Terence shot his wife a look sharp enough to cut, and she immediately shrank back into silence. Daddy waved his hand through the air, cutting off any further discussion like a judge with a gavel. "We're not throwing family money at this thing," he declared. "Terence is working on securing a fourth restaurant location in Marietta. That's where our investment priority is." Terence smirked at me like he just won Olympic gold in some competition I hadn't agreed to enter. I tried one final time, my voice rising with desperation. "This isn't a handout I'm asking for," I said firmly. "It's an investment with projected returns that I've calculated conservatively. I built my entire career from absolutely nothing. You know I'm good for this money." Daddy shook his head slowly, his decision already carved in stone. "You chose your own path, Latrice. The family business has to come first, always." Terence added with a cruel edge, "Maybe if you actually helped out at the restaurants instead of playing artist, we'd take you more seriously." I wanted to scream until my throat was raw. I'd given them hundreds of thousands of dollars, bailed them out repeatedly when they couldn't make payroll, and they still saw me as some kid with a sketchbook and unrealistic dreams. That dining room felt smaller by the second, the air thick and suffocating with their dismissal and rejection. I packed up my laptop with trembling hands, fighting back tears of frustration and hurt. Camille caught my eye as I headed toward the door, mouthing "I'm so sorry," but her sympathy didn't change anything or make it better. Driving home through Atlanta traffic, I replayed their words over and over, each one a fresh reminder that I would never, ever be enough for them. Daddy's entire focus stayed locked on Terence, always Terence, no matter how many times I proved my worth and capability. Mama's silence cut just as deep as Daddy's words, her loyalty permanently tied to his vision and his plans. Even Camille, who clearly saw real potential in my business idea, couldn't find the courage to stand up to them. That night, I sat alone in my Buckhead apartment staring at my carefully crafted business plan, feeling hollow inside. I'd poured everything I had into it, exactly like I'd poured everything into my family for years. But their rejection wasn't really about the money or the business model. It was about me as a person. They fundamentally didn't believe in me, and that truth hurt more than I could fully process or admit. One evening after a tense family dinner at their house, I overheard something I was absolutely not meant to hear. The table had been cleared of dishes, and I'd stepped into the kitchen to grab my jacket, planning to escape back to my own space. Camille lingered near the sink, her hands fidgeting nervously with a dish towel. She glanced around to make sure we were alone, then pulled me aside into the pantry, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. "Latrice, there's something you really need to know," she said, her eyes darting anxiously toward the dining room where Daddy and Terence were still talking. "Terence has been taking money from the restaurant accounts. Thousands and thousands of dollars. That's the real reason they're struggling so badly." My stomach dropped like I'd stepped off a cliff. I knew the restaurants were in financial trouble, but I'd assumed it was just challenging market conditions and increased competition. "He's been skimming for at least 3 years, Camille continued, her voice shaking with fear and guilt. "I found receipts, hidden bank accounts, forged signatures. He's been lying straight to your parents' faces this whole time." I stood frozen in that pantry, processing her words while my entire worldview shifted. Camille looked absolutely terrified, like she just committed the ultimate betrayal of her own husband. Before I could form any kind of response, I heard Daddy's voice rising from the other room. I crept closer to the doorway, staying hidden in the shadows where they couldn't see me. He was talking to Mama, their voices low but carrying that sharp edge of serious discussion. "We need to finalize the will this month," Daddy said, his tone firm and final. "Terence is the only one holding this family together properly. Latrice is off doing her own thing, chasing her dreams. She doesn't really care about us or this legacy." My heart started pounding so hard I thought they might hear it. Mama murmured something I couldn't quite make out, then said softly, "She's given us so much over the years, Stephen. We can't just ignore that." Daddy cut her off immediately. "Money isn't loyalty, and loyalty is what matters. Terence represents our legacy moving forward. We are leaving the restaurants to him, all 3 locations." I felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room in one instant. They were cutting me out completely, erasing me from their future plans after everything I'd sacrificed and given. I slipped out the back door into the humid Atlanta night, my mind racing in 1,000 directions. All those years of paying Mama's crushing medical bills, bailing Terence out of his self-created disasters, saving their restaurants from bankruptcy, and they saw me as disloyal? As not caring? I drove home in a complete daze, replaying Camille's shocking confession and Daddy's cold words over and over. Terrence's theft explained everything: the constant cash shortages, the late payments to vendors that I'd covered, the mysterious losses they could never quite account for. And yet they were choosing him anyway, rewarding his betrayal and criminal behavior. The betrayal burned in my chest like hot coals, but I wasn't ready to confront them yet. Not quite yet. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a text from Mama that would change everything. "Don't call or come over. We're done." Those words hit me like a physical punch to the gut. I stared at my phone screen, hands trembling uncontrollably. This wasn't just about the will or the money anymore. This was deeply personal. Mama, the one I'd always felt closest to despite everything, was shutting me out completely. I typed back just 2 words, "Got it," and hit send before I could second-guess myself or try to fix things one more time. My fingers hovered over the call button for a long moment, but I stopped myself. No more chasing them down, no more begging and pleading for scraps of affection. If they wanted me gone from their lives, I'd give them exactly that. I opened my banking app with shaking hands and systematically cancelled every single recurring payment I'd set up for them over the years. Mama's dialysis treatments and medications? Gone. Terrence's debt payments that I'd been covering monthly? Stopped immediately. The restaurant's utility bills and vendor payments? No longer my problem or responsibility. I'd spent over $350,000 keeping them afloat, sacrificing countless hours and opportunities to fund their lives and dreams, and they'd thrown it back in my face like garbage. Cutting those financial ties felt like shedding a massive weight I'd been carrying on my shoulders for years. But it also hurt in ways I hadn't expected. I wasn't just cutting off money, I was letting go of the hope that they would ever truly see me or value me as their daughter. As I sat there in my apartment staring at the confirmation emails for all those cancelled transactions, I felt this strange mixture of relief and rage flowing through me. Camille's words kept echoing in my mind. Terrence's theft, hidden for years while I kept pouring money in to cover his tracks. How long had Mama and Daddy known the truth? Had they been covering for him this whole time, or were they really that blind? Either way, their choice to favor him over me couldn't have been any clearer. That night, I lay awake staring at my ceiling, Mama's text burning in my mind like a brand. "We're done." It wasn't just a message. It was a declaration of war, a final statement. They'd chosen their side, and I wasn't standing on it. But I wasn't that same desperate girl anymore, begging for their approval and attention like a puppy. I'd built my entire life without their real support. And now I was going to protect what I'd created. Their betrayal had lit a fire inside me that I'd never felt before, and I refused to let it burn me down into ashes. I heard about the fallout through mutual friends and distant relatives. The Washington family restaurants filed for bankruptcy, unable to survive without my financial backing propping them up. Terrence faced serious legal consequences when vendors started suing and his hidden accounts came to light, exposing years of systematic theft. Mama and Daddy retreated into a quiet, isolated life in their Cascade Heights home, their once proud legacy crumbling into dust. Camille, I learned through the grapevine, had divorced Terrence and moved to Charlotte to start completely fresh. I didn't reach out to her. That chapter of my life was closed and locked. I moved forward with everything I had, pouring my energy and passion into my design firm. I found angel investors who believed in my sustainable design vision, and within 8 months, a national hospitality group acquired my concept for $1.2 million. That money gave me the freedom to expand properly, hiring a talented team and taking on clients from New York to Los Angeles. My life wasn't perfect or without challenges, but it was authentically mine, built on my own terms and nobody else's expectations. I found genuine peace in setting firm boundaries, in choosing myself over family that had never chosen me. The pain of their betrayal still lingered sometimes in quiet moments, but it no longer defined who I was or limited what I could become. Looking back on everything now, I learned something absolutely vital that I want to share. Real respect starts with respecting yourself first. I spent years desperately trying to earn their love and approval, thinking I had to constantly prove my worth through sacrifice and money. But no amount of financial support or personal sacrifice could ever change how they fundamentally saw me. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish like they tried to claim. It was pure survival, saving myself from drowning